Good evening, everybody. We're right on time at 6 o'clock, so we'll get started.
Evening, everybody.
So thank you so much to all of you who've joined us this evening to hear about the pros and cons of pension consolidation. Special thanks to George for running the session, and an extra special thanks to Karen, who is a client of George's, who's agreed to be interviewed as part of our session this evening about her circumstances and what she decided to do with her pensions. Just to explain the format of this evening, I'll hand over to George shortly, who's going to run through a presentation. Following that, he'll then run an interview with Karen. And following that, it will be over to you for the Q&A session. We have had one or two questions come in as part of the registration, so thank you to those people. I would encourage you to raise your questions as we go through the session. Please can you use the Q&A device for that. And what we'll do is we'll tackle those questions at the end as part of the Q&A. So without further ado, I shall hand over to George.
Thank you, Celeste, and thanks again to Karen for joining us and for everyone who's attending this evening. My name's George Tuck. I'm an independent financial advisor at Flying Colours, and as Celeste has already mentioned, today we'll be talking through some of the pros and the cons of pension consolidation, when it might be a good idea and when it might not be. So, bear with me, guys. Pension consolidation, according to studies, is the most anticipated trend in the industry over the next 5 years when it comes to financial services. There's a growing perception of the importance of saving into a pension, and that can be illustrated by things like auto-enrolment, whereby firms are now almost obliged to provide pension savings and vehicles for their employees. That may not have been so much the case many years ago, but it certainly is now. Whether or not pension consolidation is the right thing to do, well, that's a very broad question. It will really depend on your individual circumstances, your objectives, and what existing pensions you have in place. And we'll talk a bit more about when it may or may not be the right thing to do during today's presentation. Now, there are lots of potential benefits. We'll go through each of those one by one very shortly. But there are potential drawbacks, pitfalls, and things you should be aware of before making that sort of decision. One thing that will probably come through quite heavily during today's presentation is that really it's best to seek professional advice or at least guidance before making these kind of decisions. Okay. So pension consolidation is the process of combining several pension pots into one. This can involve transferring the balances from various pension schemes into a single, new, or existing pension plan. Okay, a bit slow with the slides today, guys, apologies. Okay, here we go. So there are various types of pension. We've broken them down into 3 distinct categories here. Firstly, we have workplace pensions. These pensions are usually provided by your employers, and employees might have multiple workplace pensions if they've changed jobs frequently. You know, you might have picked 5 or 6 up throughout your working life, if not more. Within this category, there are a few subcategories. You may have heard terms such as defined benefit, final salary, career average, defined contribution. They all have their different features, and they can all play different roles in terms of how they fit into your actual personal retirement planning. Okay. In terms of how you go about transferring or consolidating pensions, you could either look to set up a new pension plan from the open market. There's many different pensions to choose from. You could set one up yourself or with help from a financial advisor, and then transferring all of your existing schemes into the new plan. Alternatively, you might decide to transfer into an existing scheme, whether that be a personal pension you've arranged before or an existing pension that your employer has set up on your behalf. Okay. So what are the potential benefits of consolidating your pension? Firstly, the management of pensions. This is one that tends to come up a lot when I speak to potential new clients or people that are considering consolidating their pensions. They're simply bogged down in the amount of paperwork and information that's provided from lots of different providers. It makes it very difficult for them to make heads or tails of what they actually have in terms of pension savings and what they might be entitled to when they come to retire. So it becomes a lot easier to track and manage your pension savings if they're all in one place. Especially with the new modern pension schemes available to us, they can often be managed online as well. So you could easily access them from your mobile phone or from an iPad, rather than having to trawl through shed loads of paperwork. There'd be a reduced administrative burden of dealing with multiple policies and providers. If, for example, you need to ask a question about your pension and they're all in one place, it's far easier than calling round to 5 or 6 different providers and spending hours on end on hold on the telephone. And it does mean you should be able to operate a more consistent strategy when it comes to your pension savings. We'll all have our own individual objectives when it comes to retirement, about how we'd like to retire, when we'd like to retire, how much we plan to spend, etc., etc. And it makes sense, therefore, to have an overall strategy that matches up to all of those things. And it should be far easier to do that if you have all of your pensions in one place. There are some potential cost savings as well when it comes to pensions. The level of fees being charged within any different pension can vary quite significantly. I've seen some pension schemes that charge up to 5 times more than another. And the structure and the transparency of those charges can vary significantly as well. You might encounter charges such as fund costs, pension platform fees, management costs. They can all have different methods of charging, and it can be quite difficult to establish how much you're really paying for your pension. Some research was recently conducted by a company called Money Farm, and they found that 1 in 2 British people weren't even aware they were paying a fee for their pensions, let alone being aware of how much they're paying. Now, the potential reduction in fees and charges could make a really significant difference to the value of your pensions when you come to retire. We're talking about thousands of pounds in some cases, sometimes even tens of thousands of pounds, simply by reviewing the pensions that you have and making sure your pensions are in a cost-effective environment where they can grow. Any cost saving on your pension should also mean more investment growth in the long term as well. Now, with some providers, they might offer tiered charging structures, which mean that by having more savings in one place, you can become entitled to more attractive levels of charging. So that's another potential economy of scale when it comes to combining your pensions. And just generally saving costs when it comes to the administration of the pensions. We all know that old saying, time is money. The less time you can spend having to manage the pensions could be viewed as a cost saving as well, I suppose. Okay. Improved investment choices. We can once again see in all of the different pensions available to us from the open market that they have varying levels of investment choice. Some providers will only let you choose from a very limited selection of investment funds, or even invest in strictly their own funds that they provide, whereas other pension providers may give us a much wider choice of investment. Now, that could lead to having a more well-diversified pension. Ultimately, we don't want to keep all of our eggs in one basket, and by spreading our investments around, we can protect ourselves from large shocks in the market. I think we all know over the past few years that things in the world can change very quickly, and you want to try and protect yourself and insulate yourself from those potential problems as much as you possibly can. Having a wider selection of investment choices available to you can give you a better chance of doing that. It also means you should be able to have a strategy that aligns with your goals and your personal appetite for taking on things like investment risk. We're all different in this respect. Some of us are very ambitious and adventurous when it comes to how we'd like our funds to be invested, whereas others can be very cautious and have that sort of slow and steady wins the race mantra. If you've got a wider choice of investment selection available to you, you've got more chance of building a strategy that suits you and that can hopefully get you to where you want to be by the time your retirement eventually comes around. Okay. Better retirement planning. So having all of your pensions in one place can simplify the process of planning and predicting your retirement income. If I had several pensions with different providers, it may be difficult to understand what I might be entitled to as an income when I retire, which can be quite confusing, and may make it difficult to plan accordingly and ensure that we're saving enough into our pensions. By keeping all our pensions in one place, we should have a clearer view on these things. Now, that's really important in the build up to your retirement, but also when you're actually retired and taking money from your pension plan, it can be easier to develop and implement a unified withdrawal strategy. Again, this is certainly an area where I feel good financial advice can add significant value to you, ensuring that you draw down from your pensions in the most prudent and sensible and effective way. Can also make afterlife planning far more simple and straightforward. It's a slightly morbid topic, but I've had many clients that have came to me having to deal with the inheritance of a loved one and dealing with their estate and having bits of paper all over the place and finding it very difficult to manage the estate of someone that's passed away. If all of your pensions are in one defined set place, it can make life much easier for people to deal with if, when you pass away, which for some of us might be an important added feature, let's say. Now we've got some statistics on the screen. This was taken from a study carried out by Standard Life called Retirement Voice, completed last year. And I think it really does illustrate how people might feel about consolidating pensions and the potential benefits. People that consolidated their pensions generally found that they were easier to manage. They liked the fact that they could see all of their pensions in one place. They felt probably more reassured by that, I imagine. It's great that they can manage things online. We can see that many people felt that way. We manage most of our lives online these days through our mobile devices, whether that be online banking or mortgages. There's no reason why pensions should be any different to that, really. Less paperwork. I think everyone in this seminar today will agree that less paperwork is a positive, and a really big and important one there at the end, retirement planning. It can make retirement planning far easier, as I covered on the previous slide. Now, we've been through some positives there, or potential benefits of consolidating your pensions, but what are the potential drawbacks? There are certain situations where it might not be wise to transfer or consolidate your pensions. And again, it's an area where getting good guidance and advice can help provide some clarity here. So, whilst things like cost saving can be a benefit, it can also become a drawback if you consolidate your pensions into a pension that you already have that's got particularly high charging. A really common way in which this happens is where people decide to consolidate all of their pensions into the pension provided by their current employer. There's no reason to assume that the pension provided by your current employer is the most cost effective. Many employers use pension services such as Nest, which actually tend to be quite expensive when compared to the market average. Now, when you leave the scheme, you may also face penalties, additional costs by transferring out of schemes. This is particularly prevalent, with older pension schemes. You might see terminology such as exit penalty, market value reduction, or market value adjustment, whereby there's a cost of leaving that pension, and that needs to be taken into account when deciding whether it's the right thing to do. You may also lose benefits, bonuses, should I say, by completing the transfer, which will have the same effect. And there are costs associated with consolidating your pensions, whether that be by using an online service or by paying for financial advice. Certain pensions may come with valuable safeguarded benefits, and if you were to transfer out of those schemes, those benefits can be lost. Now, there's quite a wide variety of benefits, but some of the key ones you might see, again, particularly with older workplace pensions, or for those of you that might have contracted out from the second state pension scheme once upon a time, these benefits can include things like guaranteed annuity rates, which can be far more attractive than the annuity rates available on the market today. Likewise, with things like guaranteed minimum pensions that can protect your pension from inflation. And in some cases, these older schemes can provide over and above the typical level of tax-free cash available from a pension scheme. Typically, a pension allows you to draw down up to 25% of it tax-free. Some of the older schemes could have significantly more tax-free cash available, which again might be lost if you transfer out of those schemes. In most situations, it's possible that by transferring out, you could actually be worse off rather than better off. So again, if you're unsure, always seek advice. And some key considerations here. Bear with me. Thank you. Now, when we decide how to approach the decision of whether to consolidate our pensions, the best place to start from is to consider what your personal situation and circumstances, objectives and goals actually look like. And that might include when you want to retire, the type of retirement you hope to have, what level of income you're likely to need in your retirement, what kind of capital outlays you might expect to encounter during your retirement, whether that be specific holidays, replacing cars, supporting children with house purchases. These are all of the topics you want to consider when deciding whether and how to consolidate your pensions. Another one I mentioned earlier on was afterlife planning and whether or not you have someone that you might need to protect in your absence. That may also affect your decision of how to go about consolidating your pensions. Once you've got that really clear vision of what you're hoping to achieve, the next step is to review what you already have and see how it stacks up, reviewing those current pension plans, the strengths and the weaknesses, and whether you can make any improvements here. One thing to bear in mind is that if you decide to transfer out from an existing employer's pension, that can sometimes impact upon the way in which your employer contributes to your pensions. There's no point in transferring an employer's pension into an older scheme that you might think is more cost effective if you're then going to lose out on the contributions your employer makes to that pension. So again, that's another really important consideration. Okay. Sorry guys, I missed a few slides there. So in conclusion, pension consolidation is a growing trend. More and more pension savers exploring the potential benefits. And whilst there are several potential benefits, it's important to understand what you might be giving up by doing so. And getting good financial advice can ensure you make sensible, informed decisions, giving you a better chance of achieving your retirement goals. And we'll now speak with Karen, who's very kindly agreed to join us this evening to tell us about her own experiences when consolidating her pension schemes with the help of Flying Colours. Hi, Karen, how are you doing this evening?
Very well, thank you, George. Yeah, good.
Excellent. Again, thanks a lot for joining us. Karen, I'm just going to go through a few questions with you now, just so those joining us this evening can get a good idea of your own situation, why you decided to look into pension consolidation and how the process went for you personally, really. So to start with, would you mind telling us a bit more about yourself, your career and who you are really?
Yeah, okay, my name's Karen and I've been in healthcare for 48 years. So that's been my life for 48 years. I'm a workaholic. It's something that I've enjoyed. But now I'm coming up to the time where I'm thinking I might retire. So that's my life, really.
Excellent, great. Now, Karen, you and I have spoke at length about some of the topics we're going to be discussing today. But tell me a bit more about how far in advance of retirement you decided to start planning.
To be honest, when I started all those years ago, it wasn't as readily available, pensions and things like that. It was not something that you encouraged all those years ago. You did it if you felt that you had to. Obviously, the NHS we did, but it was not something that you encouraged. And then over the years, I think seeing what happened to my mum and dad, they were independent, they worked for themselves, and unfortunately they lost everything. And that was heartbreaking to see that happen. And at that point, I thought, I'd got a daughter at that time. I thought I've got to think about the future for both me and her. What happens if I've got nothing? And I think when I came to you, my words to you were, I don't want to be a destitute old lady. Now, I don't have a high-flying social life, but I do like to do certain things. And when I do retire, I want to be able to do what I do now comfortably and not have to think I can't afford that. And I realised that living off the state pension wasn't going to be enough to have the sustainable life that I want to achieve, because bills don't get any less when we retire, they get more expensive because we're at home more. So all of those things were what I considered, and I thought, I can't do this on my own. I need somebody to tell me how to do this. And one of the things that I was wary about was that there are a lot of schemes out there that can grab you in, offering you all these huge benefits, all these huge plus factors. But you also hear of all the downside where people get drawn into these schemes that actually are scams. And I was very wary that if I tried to navigate my way through all this, I would probably get lost and I would probably lose a lot more money. So that's why I thought I've got to get help from somebody like you, George.
Like myself. And
Yes.
that's why you decided to reach out for a financial advisor, I suppose.
Yes.
Was that the
Yes.
first thing you did, or did you try to speak to anyone else before speaking with a financial advisor?
No, I spoke to Nationwide, somebody at the
Okay.
Nationwide, and said, what do I do? And it was something they didn't do, and they recommended that's what I did. And so I took their advice, and very luckily I found you, which was my great advantage, I feel.
That's very flattering, thank you. And you mentioned Nationwide helped you to find a financial advisor. I believe they put you in touch with the website Unbiased, which led you to find me. Is that correct?
It is. Obviously, that's the other thing. You don't know how many people that you will go to are actually getting a cut of who they're advising, and you don't know whether they're doing it for the right reasons. But I felt comfortable going to Nationwide that they would actually be independent and won't push you to the wrong people.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a bit about how your parents struggled a little bit during retirement. Were there any other bits and pieces that concerned you at all about your retirement, or was it mainly just that concern over not being able to live comfortably?
Predominantly, and also about being able to leave something for my daughter. Sadly, that isn't going to happen now because I've lost my daughter, but I have great nieces and great nephews, and I felt as an auntie maybe I should be able to give something back to them, because we all know how difficult it is for the youngsters to get on the market. Fortunately, I've been able to purchase a house, have no mortgage, and all of those things. It's not so easy for the youngsters, and I just felt that's what I want to do, and I wanted to control that.
That makes perfect sense. And throughout your working life, you built up several different pensions. I think it was 5, 6 or 7 off the top of my head. How did each of those come about?
Obviously, different pensions were part of different roles that I was in my working career. And I think for me, it's easy to bury our head in the sand. And I think, that's what happens. It's easier just to think, oh, they're there. But like you said earlier, you get all this paperwork, but actually it's paperwork that blinds you with science. If you're not into that, you just look at it and think, oh, yeah, there's money there. But then I thought, do you know what? I'm not sure I know exactly what I have got. And I think it, again, was brought home to me, sadly, when I was sorting out my mum's affairs when she came into care, because after my dad died, she didn't have a clue what she'd got where. And going to different people and trying to find out what my mum had got was, as you said, it was so hard because mum knew she'd got stuff, but she said, well, I don't know. I never remember doing that. I didn't know I got that. And so I don't want that to happen to other people if I need that support later in life, because it's hard work. And also not knowing exactly what you've got coming was hard work, because you get this forecast from all these different pension pots. You're thinking, well, what does that actually equate to? What is that going to give me long term?
Absolutely. That's where the confusion comes in, to how you're going to generate the income you need for your retirement. And obviously you dealt with myself, but what did Flying Colours do generally as an organisation to help you with that decision and then to eventually make that decision happen?
I think for me, George, it was about listening, not treating me as if I had no idea and that I really should know better. and not actually telling me what I should do, but actually giving me the options to make my own choices, and to actually listen and to listen to what I was saying. And I just said, I just want to, as I said, I don't want to be destitute when I get old. And that's all I wanted from you, just to know that I was going to be comfortable and that I could do this, I could retire and it would work. Because I think the hardest thing for anybody that's thinking about retirement is it's a scary process to make that decision, because we're used to having a regular income, or I am, and you're giving up such a lot and taking that leap of faith and thinking, yes, okay, but is it really? And I needed to know that it was going to be okay and I was going to be able to retire.
Absolutely. And do you feel more confident now that you've gone through that process when it comes to considering the prospect of retirement?
Absolutely. I know more about what my options are going to be. You've helped me through that. I know roughly what I'm going to be expecting, and I'm not going through, trying to climb out of a deep well to get to the top. I feel that I do know something of what's going to happen when that final decision happens.
Which we've obviously discussed quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how you're going to answer this one, Karen, but are you looking forward to retirement?
I'm scared. I'm really scared because I have worked all of my life. Even when I had my daughter, I used to go, I worked nights and my parents helped with her. I've never not worked. So to not work after working for 48 years in a full-time career, apart from when I was a youngster and I did part-time work, I'm not going to have that, if you like, reason to get up every day to go. You've got to have a reason. And I think that's the one thing that scared me about giving up. What am I going to do if I haven't got to go to work every day? Now, I don't really have that issue because I know that I will find things to do, but it is scary because each day you've got a purpose. You're not going to have a purpose unless you make your own purpose. So yeah, I'm scared, but I think it will be nice to not be working. I think that will be a pleasure that I'm looking forward to. And I think, to be fair, I think losing my daughter is when I re-evaluated what life was all about. And I think that's when you sort of think there's more to life than working.
That's it. And I think the concerns that you have about what you're going to do with your time when you retire are shared by many. And I think that's why for many people, getting the financial stuff out of the way and taken care of is important, because it gives them a chance to then start to try and answer those other big important questions about your retirement. Many thanks, Karen, for answering those questions and sharing your story with myself and the guest today. Just have one or two last slides, I believe, Celeste, to go through before going through to the question and answers. Thank you. Okay. So on the screen now, we have some further data from the study that I referenced earlier by Standard Life, the Retirement Voice 2023 study. And I think some of the statistics we can see here do actually really back up some of the sentiments shared by Karen this evening. So the study found that when working with a financial advisor, 41% of retired men and 44% of retired women wish they'd sought advice to plan for retirement, and that 55% are worried that their pensions won't last throughout their retirement. And that's something I come across every day in my day-to-day job. 39% of retired people worry about whether they've made the right choices about how and when they've accessed their pension. And 92% say that a guaranteed income in retirement is important. At the same time, 89% want to be able to access their pensions flexibly. And balancing these requirements is tricky, especially if you want to pass on the wealth. And less than four in 10 people think they're saving enough for retirement. Now, I do have some important information disclaimers here to bear in mind, so I'm just going to quickly read through these for you. The information contained in these slides is based on our understanding of current legislation, which may and can change, of course. Nothing in this presentation should be considered as either a personal recommendation to invest or confirmation of the suitability of any investment for your personal circumstances. If you're unsure about any investment, please always speak to your financial advisor. The value of your investments and the income derived from it can go up as well as down, and investors can sometimes get back less than they've originally invested. It's important not always to rely on past performance, and it's not always a guide to the future. In general, guys, I think it's really, really important to seek advice before consolidating your pensions. Everyone's circumstances are different. Everyone requires a different solution. It's not one size fits all situation. And now on to some questions. Celeste, if you'd like to take over from here.
Yep, will do. Thanks very much, George, and thank you, Karen. Karen's agreed to be available for any questions that you may have for her as well. But I think what we'll do is we'll start off with a couple of questions that came in from those when people who registered in advance. So first off, I have 2 defined contribution pots and planning to retire in 9 months' time. If I don't combine them and use one for drawdown, can I still pay into the second one for a year after I've taken the tax-free lump sum from the drawdown pot?
It's a really good question, Celeste, and the answer will depend on specifically how the pensions are accessed. If you decide to take tax-free cash from one pension, that won't necessarily make it impossible for you to continue to contribute to another scheme. However, the rules around recycling money from one pension into another, known as the money purchase annual allowance, can be quite complex. So if you do decide to take any money from a pension, I would go and seek professional advice before doing so to ensure it won't impact on your ability to save into a different pension moving forward. Because the last thing you want to do is take money from one pension and restrict your ability to continue to save for your retirement. In some circumstances, you may even face tax charges further down the line, which you might not be expecting. So do be very careful with those ones.
I've read about these allowances and I've never been able to get my head around it. It's definitely when my time comes, it's definitely something I would just take advice on, because it just looks so complicated to me.
Absolutely.
The next question is, I think I may have pensions from previous jobs, but I can't find any information on them. Is there any way that I can track them down?
Yeah, thanks, Celeste. Again, really, really common issue. Many of us have worked for many, many different organisations for our working lives rather than staying in one place. And as a result, we will have accumulated pensions from here, there and everywhere. It's also difficult to sometimes look back and remember whether certain employers even provided a pension scheme or not. You may have moved house several times, in which case you might not receive correspondence from these providers anymore. So if you're ever unsure, the government provides a really useful pension tracing service where you can enter details about your previous employment, and it can help you to track down whether or not those schemes were available at the time and where the pensions might be held today. And I can ask Celeste to share a link to that service in our chat box today for anyone that's unsure on that one.
Yep, I'll do that, absolutely. While I'm doing that, perhaps you can answer this next question. Could you talk about another risk associated with pension consolidation, which is the risk of a provider or a fund going bust? So I guess, I mean, that's a risk in any, even if you have several pensions, but I guess if they're all in one pot, that risk is even bigger. So is there a way to mitigate that?
But there's 2 different aspects to that question, I think. Firstly, you've got the pension wrapper itself, the pension provider. Now, pension providers benefit from unlimited protection from the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, and usually you should be guaranteed at least 90% of your scheme to be protected by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme if a pension scheme goes bust. So you can feel at least confident the majority of your pension savings are safe. At the same time, it may be that you would like to ensure your pensions are with a well-known establishment that has good pedigree to give you more confidence in the pension savings staying safe. Some pension providers are household names, whereas others may be more obscure. And as a financial advisor and an independent financial advisor, for me, it's important that when I recommend a pension solution to a client, that it's one I'm confident in to start with. The other aspect to consider is the investments being held within the pension. Ultimately, investments can go down as well as up. Some investments will be more risky than others, and choosing how to invest your pension savings can be crucial. You know, if you invest in really high risk investments, like startup companies, for example, there might be a chance that those companies go bust and your pension savings are lost. So I think there's a couple of things to think about there.
Thank you. So the next question, should I consolidate my older pension schemes into my current employer's pension?
I think in a way that question's been answered throughout the seminar today, but really the question is the employer's pension the best place for your pension savings? So if I'm trying to decide the best place for my pension savings, generally speaking, I want it to be in a really low cost environment. If my employer's pension is far lower cost than the other schemes I have, then I suppose that could be a sensible decision. Likewise, when it comes to the investment options, are there good investment options within my employer's pension? And if there are, great. And if there isn't, perhaps I could look elsewhere for my ideal solution.
Next up, can I transfer pension savings that I've accrued whilst working abroad?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one I've come across a few times. It does depend on the country you're working in and the legislation there. Some schemes are described as what I would call qualifying or recognised, in which case they can be transferred from a different country into a UK-based pension. Other schemes, not necessarily so. So again, it does depend. So a bit of a vague answer, I appreciate. I've seen some incidences where rather than transferring a pension into a UK-based scheme, the individual has simply received a cash lump sum, which then they would have to, invest themselves or use themselves rather than being able to transfer directly into a pension. Generally speaking, a pension transfer would be more tax efficient than doing that. But again, it does depend on the country you're working in and the type of scheme you've been paying into.
So it's a question for me. So in that instance where there's a lump sum to be invested, I guess that would be restricted by the annual allowance?
Absolutely. So as individuals, we can only benefit from tax relief that we pay into our pensions up to a certain limit. At the moment in the UK, that limit is £60,000 or the amount we're earning. So if, for example, you have a significantly larger sum than that, it might be difficult to pay that money all into your pension in one go, and doing so could lead to you paying unwanted tax charges. Again, I'm going to say it again. Seek advice before making any decisions on that one.
Just goes to show how complicated it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll leave the final question with Karen, if that's okay, Karen. The question is, what do you intend to do on your first day of retirement?
Sleep, lie in. Have a lie in. I haven't had a lie in for many, many years. That's the first thing I'm going to do.
I think that's probably what I would do as well. Fantastic. Well, that's all the questions. I have put the link that George mentioned to the government website that helps you to track lost pensions. I've put that into the chat. A recording of this webinar will be made available to you on email, most likely early next week. So please do look out for that. But in the meantime, if you have any other questions, you're very welcome to contact us and we'll do our best to come back to you. So all it remains then is to say thank you very much to everyone who's attended this evening, and special thanks to George and to Karen for joining us. And we hope you can join us for our next webinar to be announced. Thanks again. Good night.
Thanks, guys.